For those of you I have not had the opportunity to meet yet, I am Nicole Norvell. I'm the director here in the Office of Early Childhood. And Renee Withers, who is my deputy director, waving at you there, is in the office with me too today. So we'll be trying to navigate through one of our first times to really do some live discussion with all of you. So bear with us, as this is not normal necessarily for us. So excited though to be able to do that. Okay, I am going to share my screen, and I think I will do that correctly. And hopefully that means you all can see that. Renee's giving me a thumbs up, so that's good. Okay, awesome. Oh, now look at that. Okay, so today we're really going to talk about our Build, Learn, Grow program, planning for the use of the American Rescue Plan Act funds. Most of this discussion is really going to be Renee and I and our opportunity to hear from you, so this Q&A section, and then some closing and next steps. So Build, Learn, Grow, hopefully you all are starting to get more familiar with the name of this effort here, and that's really what we're branding everything that we're doing related to the supplemental funding that we've received. And as you hopefully have known and been participating in, we've had lots of programs going. So some of that has been our emergency relief grants, which those of you who receive CCDF should have seen for some time now, an increase in that subsidy payment to you. To date, we've spent about 10.3 million in that increase in payment. We have spent almost 2 million on the equipment and supplies. So those of you who took advantage of the opportunity to order through Fastenal to get some additional things for your programs. We've continued to waive those background check fees, and you'll see there about $360,000 in that pot of money. And then the onboarding stipends, we've spent about 1.8 million in supporting you and hopefully hiring new teachers to your programs. And then we've also partnered with the Department of Education to increase those CACFP reimbursements. So those of you who participate in that program should have already seen an increase in that already. And that will continue a little bit through May. And so then we have continued to pay the copay for families in the subsidy program. And we're about 2.9 million in for that. And then we have had our Build, Learn, Grow Scholarship Fund, which hopefully a lot of you are participating in. Still lots of room to serve more children, though. We are serving right now about 5,600 children, but we have lots of capacity for more. So if you have questions about that program, let us know. We certainly can answer those via email, or if you want to chat after today. We have expanded the opportunity for families to receive subsidy through job search, so they don't have to be working or going to school. They can also just be looking for work. And so you'll see by that number, we've had quite a few Hoosiers apply under that category, which is great. We know that lots of people are in this space of looking for work. And then starting this week, our partnership with Ivy Tech launches, and the ability for those students attending Ivy Tech to have a priority into the program. So that everyone who is working or going to school at Ivy Tech has the opportunity to come in. So, and then some of our statewide supports, since we have done the enrollment dashboard, and for those of you on the call who have done that, I so appreciate your willingness to do that. That has been tremendously helpful. But we have seen an increase then in your ability to fill seats. And I will ask you that if you're not muted, if you could do that, that would be really helpful. We've also seen some of you complete the business fundamentals training that we've set as a requirement to receiving these funds, but still lots of you who still need to do that. So please make sure you get that done by the end of the month. And then we will be partnering with Early Learning Indiana to launch a new online marketplace. So a couple of just important updates we wanted to share with you. So one is the emergency relief grant extension. So grants will be extended, so that additional funding that you're receiving for your children in subsidy. And that will go from February 28th to March 13th will be that final payment point there. So then you would get that payment March 30th, because all of you who do subsidy, remember you kind of do the weeks of service and then we pay you after the fact. So we're excited to be able to extend that support to you. And the same with waived copays. You'll see the date there for that, but we will be extending our support of families as well to pay those copays on their behalf. The one-time equipment and supply allowance with Fastenal, we made those available May through July 31st, so it's now closed. So unfortunately, if you did not get your order, you won't have the opportunity to do that, but we will try to continue to partner with you all on some other initiatives like that. So sorry if you didn't participate, but for all of you who did, hopefully you found that to be useful. Okay, so the heart of what we're talking about today then is the American Rescue Plan Act funding. And the way that that came to us from Congress was in three kind of different buckets. So the first one is the Child Care Stabilization Grants. And so these are funds that are for us to utilize to give providers to help stabilize what's been happening to you. There will be some more information coming to you here in the next several weeks on that. We have been working on the infrastructure to get those payments out to you, the cost modeling, all of those things that we have to do. We have a group of providers who've been very gracious to help test some of that for us here next week. But we're getting very close. So keep an ear out for your opportunity to apply to receive that funding. The second pot of money is the CCDF discretionary funds. And these are a little more flexible and they can be used in conjunction and should be used in conjunction with the stabilization grants to strengthen our childcare system. And then the third is a pot of money, the mandatory matching funds that come through CCDF. There was an increase in that as well. The difference with these, though, is they do typically require the state to have a state dollar to kind of match that federal one. The good news is Congress gave us a couple of years where we don't have to find those additional state funds, but eventually we will. So today, though, what we really wanted to receive feedback from you on were the discretionary funds, that pot of money in terms of how we might best invest that, because there will be more relief coming in the stabilization payments to help you with expenses that you've either already had or increased expenses you have now. But the discretionary funding, really, we want to think about some systems building pieces and how we might kind of shore up some of the gaps we have in the system. So here's just a couple of things as we start to talk today, just so you know how the funds can and can't be used, because certainly with federal funding, there's always some clauses of how you can't use them. But, you know, one of the things that really you can look towards are how we give parents greater access to high quality care, how we support the developmental and learning needs of children, how we meet parents' employment needs and childcare preferences. So things like alternative hours and extended days and weekend nights, all of those things that we know some of our families need. How we think about compensation for a skilled workforce, and then how we kind of facilitate a robust childcare industry. So below, we've given you just some of the examples from the Office of Child Care as to how these funds could be used. So one is to support those who work in essential fields. And we've been doing that through Build, Learn, Grow, certainly have the opportunity to continue that if that's something we think is important. We can improve payment practices. So things like paying on enrollment versus attendance. Those are options that we have as a state, and certainly would want to hear feedback about whether or not those are things that as our provider base you think are important. Increasing access to childcare assistance by investing in tools that can help family find care and expanding eligibility criteria. So things like our income guidelines. So there are some federal restrictions, but we do have some flexibility. So thinking about that and what qualifying activities look like for the subsidy program. And then there's this other bucket about mental health supports for children, families, and you as childcare providers and your staff that certainly the funds are allowed to be used on. What I would just say is, the funds cannot be used for construction, so we can't build childcare buildings, but you can use them for some small improvements to a building. But if what we would like to see as a group is we want to build a bunch of new childcares, unfortunately, the funding cannot be used in that way. But other than that, we have some pretty good flexibility with these funds. Okay, so what we're going to be looking at then are these kind of forward-looking opportunities for our childcare system. And if you have concerns or questions about other things our office does, please reach out to me about those. But I'm going to ask that we don't talk about those today. So, for example, if you're having issues with a particular family who is having voucher problems, please feel free to email us after this and we will absolutely help take care of you. But I'm going to ask that we try to stick to some of these pieces about systems building with these funds for today's discussion. So what I'll ask is that you, as we ask each question, if you would take a few minutes to type in the chat box kind of what you would like your answer to be. And then if someone really feels like you'd like to have a discussion, then hopefully if you don't know, we can go through it with you, but how to raise your hand. And then Renee will see that and can help me look at that so I know who's raising their hand. And then Renee is also going to help me keep an eye on the chat box so that I can also see if someone puts something really interesting in, I might call on you and say, hey, do you mind unmuting so we can talk a little bit more about that and have a discussion. We are time limited, so I'm going to ask that we all try to be succinct as much as we can in our comments. And then if you don't have a chance to talk today and you really wanted to do that, you can absolutely email me directly. And I can set up a time to call you, or you can, chat via email, whatever works best for you. All right, so here's my first question, which is, as a child care provider, how have your program's needs changed in the recent months? And then how is current funding meeting, or maybe not meeting, those evolving needs? And so I would just say, if you're okay with it, go ahead and start popping some things in the chat. I know that's a big question, right? Or if you want to just discuss it, feel free to raise your hand, and Renee and I will look at that and unmute, and then we can have some discussion. Okay, trying to see if I can, it's weird when you share your screen, I can't see the chat as well. So I'm hoping people are typing in the chat. Is that right, Renee?
Yes, we have one from Sarah Miller that just came through. She said it's really difficult to compete in the hiring market. Our tuition rates do not support the needed dollar amounts to pay our staff.
Yeah, so I'd be really interested, Sarah, if you're willing to unmute just to talk about maybe what strategies you've been doing, or anything more you'd want to say about that.
Sure. Hello, this is Sarah. I think probably statewide, everybody is seeing this, but in our county specifically, all of our factories and all of those kinds of things that are hiring, everybody is raising their dollar amount, raising. And, over the last few years, we've really tried to increase the amount we're paying our staff. But, unfortunately, like McDonald's is now paying more than us. And, some of my teachers who have degrees, they could go work at Aldi or McDonald's and make more than, unfortunately, we can afford to pay. And so I'm sure that, my peers across the state are experiencing that as well. But it just feels very defeating that, our industry is so important, and yet one of the lowest paid. And it's really difficult to recruit quality people with the limited resources we have available. So
that is super helpful. And reading through some of the chat, I see some of you correlating what you're able to pay your staff with the rates that we reimburse you. And so anyone who's willing to unmute who made that comment, I guess I would be curious, the 20% extra that you've been getting for the last several months, has that helped, or it's not helping?
Hi, this is Holly. I'm in Clark County, Indiana. And I would say that, yes, it's been helping, but only in the way of being able to give retention bonuses or hiring bonuses. Until we know that the CCDF market rate is going to increase, I'm skittish to increase hourly wages, because then I'm not going to be able to sustain that once this 20% goes away.
Okay, that's helpful. And so I would just be curious about your perspective about something, because one of the things we're always trying to balance here, right, is making sure that we reimburse at the appropriate rate, but also understanding that sometimes then what happens is that drives up your overarching rate structure, right? Which then means your private pay parents now have to pay more too. And so we're always trying to balance the fact that we don't want to drive the market up so high that families who don't get subsidy can't come to get come to see you, right? And because we say you can't charge subsidy families one thing and private pay families a different thing, right? You have to charge everyone the same thing. We're trying to balance that a little bit. I don't know if that makes sense, but would love to hear your thoughts on that. And anyone can feel free to take that question.
I was gonna say Jessica Hampton had something.
So this is Holly. I'll reply again. My private payers, I'm less worried about them, honestly, because they can afford that. In Clark County, I'm just across the bridge from Louisville, Kentucky, and the rates in Louisville are significantly higher than mine. I have 85% CCDF participation. So, for me, I know a lot of people do not have that significant of a CCDF participation rate. But that would be a huge driving factor. And I think the people that are seeking private pay, the market in our area at least would support that.
Yes. Okay, that's super helpful. And I thought I saw someone had their hand up a minute ago, but I may have lost them on my screen. So if you did, feel free to unmute it because I may just not be able to see you right now.
I'm sorry, I don't know how to raise my hand.
You're fine.
But this is Holly, and I own Little Angels Child Care Center in Lebanon. And my biggest thing with staffing is if I raise my rate to $15 an hour, I have to double the tuition. And my parents are making $18 to $25 an hour. They're not going to get a pay raise. And so they're not going to be able to sustain that.
Yep. And so Holly, you're speaking to the point I was speaking to, which is we're always trying to balance. If we give you a rate increase, right, then what a lot of providers do is you raise your rates in general so that you can get at least what we're providing as a reimbursement. But then that does mean your private pay parent rates went up too. And so I think we're trying to figure out how you balance those things as well.
Yeah. And like Steak and Shake here just raised waitressing pay to $19 an hour plus all of their tips. I can't compete with that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's super helpful. Thank you.
Good morning. This is Erica Watkins. Well, actually, it's probably afternoon your time. I'm in Lake County, Indiana. I'm sorry.
No.
That was my hand that was raised.
Okay,
and, the point was already really given because the concern is sustainability. It is great right now to think of what we would be able to do. But again, as the conversation is probably the same throughout the world at this point, is looking at who's hiring. It almost makes, if I didn't love early childhood as much as I did or do, I would probably go and work in some of these other places because it's less stressful. If I could just hold a sign that says at Cruise Car Wash and just say, come on in, have a great day, and make what they're making right now, I would definitely stick with that. So I think for me, it's just the sustainability after the fact. And as we're talking about raising, so Lake County, I'm much higher than the 85% of who would be CCDF, who need that. And I am mindful when we make those changes, when the market rate goes up. We just want to really be able to compete and compete well. And I heard the comment, I apologize for not remembering who made it, is, if we are such an important profession, and if nothing else, I am grateful that everyone realized we are essential. We always knew we were. We're just glad to know that other people are saying it now, is how do you make the money match with the essential work that we do and need to continue doing, just to move just education and everything forward.
Yes. Yep. Super helpful comments.
Hey, I just want to jump in. My name is Jessica Hampton, and I own Imagination Station in Avon. Mm-hmm. Just a couple of things. Obviously, we are so grateful for how well Indiana has handled all of this, because I see directors in other states that are losing their mind going, what are we going to do? And we're so grateful for what we've been provided. Obviously, the sustainability is a little bit almost disheartening because we've been able to give bonuses and all sorts of things, but we haven't been able to commit and say, you're worth this. Mm-hmm. And that's been a struggle for us. So we just raised our rates above the CCDF rates. Actually, they just started this week. So that's been a challenge because, of course, we have some people that are like, we can't afford it, even self-pay parents that can't afford it. But we're in Avon where you can't find a spot right now for a 2-year-old. And there's not childcare out here for a 2-year-old. We have people calling every day and we're doing tour on top of tour on top of tour. And so people are paying it, even though it's a hardship. But we need to find a way to sustain that because fortunately enough for us, and since I'm the owner, I was able to take a pay cut to make sure my staff was paid more. Not everybody can do that. Sure. And I see the pain, and coming from the teacher side of it, I see the struggle there. So we need to really work on that. And then also transportation issues with the licensed childcare centers. There's a lot of issues right now in that area with a lot of buses being failed for random things that aren't really issues. So, but they're basically expecting like new buses. So that's come up with a lot of the childcare centers in our area. But sustainability, finding a way to raise CCDF rates altogether, and something that we can do really to appreciate the staff because yes, we're essential workers and yes, we have build, learn, grow, and it's exciting and it's great, but our workers are burnt out and they're tired. And you know, they're seeing everybody else get these grants that are essential workers and they're going, but wait, I don't get an increase in pay.
Yeah, I totally hear you. And I do think one of the challenges that we face in this discussion is the fact that this is one-time money. So even the funding we're talking about today is a one-time appropriation from Congress. And so I won't likely ever be able to say to you, here is this and it's going to stay forever, because again, you know, unless Congress comes back to the table with another batch of funding, right now it's one-time money. So I do think on this conversation of wages, one of the things I would encourage you to think about that we have been thinking about with some of our national partners are, you know, what are the ways in which we can think about costs differently so that you can shift some things around? Because again, even if I said to all of you, I'm going to increase your reimbursement for X amount of time, it doesn't solve your long-term problem, right? So we do have to, I think through what might this look like. For example, if we can stand up some better shared services where some of your expenses go down that you can reinvest into wages. Those are the pieces that we are definitely trying to look towards, because again, it is one-time money. And so we just aren't going to have the opportunity to maybe do some things without thinking creatively about how to make it sustainable. And then Janine, I think I think I see your hand up. I don't know if you're talking or not. If so, I don't think you've unmuted.
Okay, there we are.
There you go. Yeah,
there we are.
Got it.
Okay. I agree with everything that Sarah and Jennifer and all the other people had discussed in reference to wages. It's really tough to compete in the markets when you're driving down the road and all these billboards and everything are up with these dollar amounts. And, you know, you look for not just a body, you know, unfortunately, if I was watching dogs, I could have 50-to-1 ratio, and that's not possible. And you're looking for quality people, not just bodies to fill those slots. So, you know, it's really difficult to not only get a staff, but get a good staff that's going to be sustainable. The other thing that I think that perhaps as a whole might help the industry is if indeed we had, and I brought this up in other meetings before, is if indeed we had an insurance plan for them. I know individually, each and every childcare facility to have their own insurance plan is a lot of money. It's a lot to sustain. It's a lot to put into and so forth. But say, for instance, an automobile dealership, they're their particular dealerships all over everywhere, but yet their insurance actually comes through, say, Chicago Auto Group has an insurance plan that they put together that everyone puts their money into and so forth, and it makes it more affordable for everyone aboard. So if indeed we can look at putting something like that together as a big giant group, and then perhaps be able to offer some insurance benefits and things like that to these people, that may be a huge difference going forward.
Thank you so much. That comment is super important. Yeah, absolutely agree with you. Okay, I'm going to move to the next one just because I don't want us to not have time, but you guys can feel free to circle back on anything that you really want to talk about. So the second question really is pre and post pandemic. You know, we've heard from many of you that the demand for childcare in your community has changed. What does that look like in your community, and what impacts does it have for you as a business operator? And we ask this question because when we look at numbers from a statewide perspective, it can get skewed, I guess is what I would say, because we're rolling up all these numbers into one thing, but we keep hearing some communities you're totally full, you have a wait list for care, and in other communities you're still sitting with a lot of empty spots. And we know that both of those things have implications on your revenue and your business model. And so would appreciate anything you'd like to share on that front. So it's interesting. I'm seeing a lot of comments about having wait lists for things, which is really interesting. Wow, 70 people on your wait list. So it's interesting. Some of you were saying this. I know in earlier comments, we had some people saying they couldn't find people to come in, right? Like they just weren't, their capacity was not at all where it needed to be. Wow, this is really interesting. Thank you so much. Anyone feel free to raise your hand that you want to say more about this, or unmute, whatever you want to do. That would be great.
I'll jump in again real quick.
Please.
This is Jessica Hampton again. I just wanted to add that like our area, Avon, has a pre-K program through the schools now. So our infant toddler programs are completely full and have been on wait lists, but we do have some room in our pre-K programs. And the schools have now opened up a whole elementary school for their pre-K program starting this year. So that's kind of where we're at. We have lots of infants and toddlers and less pre-K.
Okay. So I'd be curious, Jessica, if you're willing to share just how that's impacting your business model, right? What you all have done a great job of educating all of us about is, you know, you kind of need your older kids sometimes to balance out your younger kids from a revenue perspective. So I would just be curious, are you finding that to be more difficult than with having more infants and toddlers?
A little bit, yes. However, I mean, we still only have, I would say, out of what the 40 pre-K spots that we have, we still only have about 5 opened. So we're still pretty full, just because we do go above and beyond, and we use curriculum, and we're level 4, and our teachers are educated. Like we really push for those things, and people get to know your program. But it has made it harder to market it. Like we had 30 pre-K kids graduate last year, and then they all went off to school this year. So we had to fill all those spots. And so it does make it more of a challenge, especially towards the end of the summer when everybody's transitioning.
Yes.
But definitely everybody wants more infants and toddler spots. And it's just kind of like, we can't open any more of those.
Yes.
You need the older ones.
We have a comment from Mary Scamahorn where she's saying they're significantly below the numbers they had before COVID.
Oh,
so I'm curious to hear where she is.
Yeah, so I don't know if you could hear Renee or not, but she said, Mary, you made a comment about being well below your enrollment in terms of where you're at now versus where you were before COVID. I don't know if you're willing to share any more about that, because that would be interesting for us to learn a little bit more about. And it's okay if you don't want to. I know not everybody likes to talk on these things, so. Okay, well, we won't make her talk, or she's trying to talk and we can't hear her, one or the other, but okay. Well, and I think your comments are all really common there. I mean, we certainly understand the infant and toddler issue. And I think, those of you who are doing the enrollment reporting, you're really helping us understand at probably the right level, which is, county by county, what that looks like, because it is different based upon the community that you're in, that as we think about investing these new dollars, that will really be the way in which we have better information about where do we need to make some significant investments for infants and toddlers. So would ask that you keep doing all of those things, the reporting, because it is super, super helpful.
Mary did put something in the chat.
Oh, Mary put something in the chat. She says, stop calling on me, Nicole. It's more costly to provide care for infants and toddlers. Our public schools have increased the number of available classes for pre-K. Yeah. So we actually had a great call with a provider who was unfortunately closing in the Speedway area, just to learn a little bit about why they were closing. And that's really one of the things that she spoke to a lot to our team was over the years, their pre-K has gone to other places. And so from a financial perspective, they were really struggling because they had lots of infant and toddler spots, but not a lot of older kids, and that being just a very difficult model to sustain. So definitely understand that perspective. Okay, let's go to question 3. Okay, and this one's a little bit bigger question, so I want to make sure we get lots of time to spend on it. So like all industries, our childcare sector is certainly struggling to recruit and retain staff, as we discussed earlier, but of the interventions listed below, do you have any that you feel is most important to prioritize, and why? And we ask this because there are so many different interventions that states are using and we could use, but we want to make the right investment kind of that you all feel like makes the most sense. So would love to hear anything about those. So, our first one is really about how do we market the field better so more people consider jobs? Is it just a simple, we need to raise awareness differently? Do we need to think about statewide recruitment efforts? So things that everyone participates in so that we're all kind of paddling the boat in the same direction. Explore opportunities to share staffing resources between programs. Do we think there's some efficiencies to be gained there that might be helpful? How do we help you identify ways to redirect your dollars towards increased teacher pay? So if we had the right supports for you to help sit down and look at your budgets and think about, could you redirect money? Is that something that would be helpful? Should we be thinking about different staffing models? Is there some way to approach it differently than we have? Do we think there's some workforce prep and education models that drive quality that we want to invest in? And then how might we find ways to extend the amount of time that professionals remain in the field? So the issue of that retention. Or you can pick any other intervention that we've not discussed and say, here's what I think is really important. And you don't have to pick just one, by the way. I think lots of these are important. Okay.
I think what comment Janine made earlier today about resourcing and coming together as far as insurance, I think we just need to make, I'm turning my camera on. I feel like I get to look at eyes somewhat when I have my
Yes.
I think she made a really good point when she talked about providing insurance benefits packages. I think we lose a lot of people who go to schools or settings such as that because of what they are able to offer that we can't. And we're doing our best to keep up. And we're all doing the same work. Because I heard the last comment about schools now having preschool. So one of our facilities is in East Chicago, Indiana. So they have a preschool program and we have lost children to those programs. The way I see you, Ms. Dix, I think the way that we often make that work is I usually tell parents our program is year round. They have breaks. We don't have breaks, or if we do, they're minimal. I also say our days are longer. So if your work schedule requires an after 2 or after 3, then I think you should go with us because we have well-qualified staff who do the same work. So that's how I've been able to try to win over a little bit of that market. But I really do think if we're able to create some package, some type of support, some substitute pool, that will really help a lot of caregivers.
Yeah, thank you. That's super helpful. And so, I mean, I know when we all spoke a couple of months ago, I mean, we're still marching towards the substitute teaching pool. So that work is still ongoing and we will get there. And do you think that that's a great way to at least talk about sharing resources, right? And are having some great discussions with our K-12 partners too about how might we tap into their sub pool and, you know, how might we share resources locally as well. But yeah, I agree. I think some sharing of things is probably going to be a really important strategy. I see Sarah's hand up. Sarah, did you have something you wanted to share?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I very much agree with a lot of the comments made. But one thing, and I think someone else touched on it, is for me right now with my staff, everyone is exhausted. We have so many more behavior problems now than we've ever had. We have so many just really, you know, despite the fact that, you know, we're all open and we're all doing our job all day, every day, and we've been in person, you know, with the exception of maybe a short time last spring, the mental exhaustion of myself and the rest of my staff right now is just brutal. And I can't really put my hand on exactly what's causing the behavior problems because, you know, I haven't really had a whole lot of staff turnover, but I feel like I don't have enough resources to help my teachers or enough places to turn to ask for help with these children. And I think somebody put in the comments about how they're needing to spend more one-on-one time with kids and it's causing, you know, those kind of ratios. So I guess I would add that as an H comment, that it's just, you know, 17 years I've been doing this and the last, you know, 6-8 months, behaviors have just skyrocketed for my kids.
Yeah, we're hearing that a lot, not just even with childcare, but in some of our work with other state agencies, we're hearing that across the board in agencies working with children and families, that there just seems the pandemic has certainly exacerbated issues that were likely already there. And so, yeah, I definitely hear you and was pleased that the Office of Child Care kind of pointed out that the funding can be used for supports for mental health for families and children and programs, because I think that's a big piece of where we have to keep going here in the next several months to kind of maybe undo some of the damage that was done over the last 18 months. I totally agree, Sarah.
Yeah.
I see Erin's hand up.
Hi. So my name is Erin Owens. I'm the director at Little Lambs here in Fulton County, Indiana. And I just kind of want to go off of Sarah's a little bit there. So a few years back, we had the resource and referral agencies that we really, I mean, we utilized them consistently. We had them coming in and training us consistently. We had them like in-person trainings, things like that. And I just don't feel like that stuff is there anymore. And so us as directors have to tap into other resources and just we are stretched thin to be able to find those training avenues and things like that we just didn't have to do before. And now we're just exhausted ourselves doing that and then trying to keep up with, you know, what's going on in the world and the staffing and all of that issue. It's just, we're exhausted as well. So if we had some more like abilities to tap into people coming out and training us like that and, you know, being able to come out and observe those children that are having, you know, those issues and helping us connect to those people like we used to have. We don't have that anymore, I don't feel like.
Okay, that's really helpful feedback because I mean, the support is still there, but if it doesn't feel that way to you, then we're clearly missing something, right? I mean, I can tell you all day it's there, but if you're not sure how to get to it or you're not feeling it's meeting your needs, then there's something for us to work on. So I think that's super helpful feedback. Am I missing any other hands up, Renee? I don't think I am, but I want to be sure I'm not. Okay. All right, so let's go to question 4. Certainly we know everybody on this call believes that families deserve access to high quality care. So whether or not you're currently participating in Paths to Quality, what are your biggest barriers that you feel like you're facing in meeting or maintaining high quality program standards? And I assume staffing is one of them. So I think we understand that's kind of a given at this point. But if there are other things like that, that would be really helpful for us to understand so that we can think about how to maybe shore up some of those challenges or remove some of the barriers that are existing in that. All right, I'm hoping people are putting comments in there, but also again, feel free to unmute if you have more you would like to say about that.
One person just said education and age restrictions.
Okay, so Renee says someone said education and age restrictions. And so I know somebody in one of the earlier comments asked about the requirement in terms of the age of folks who can work with infants and toddlers. I don't know, that might be what you're referencing. But Holly, I see you have your hand up if you wanted to share a little.
So I've participated recently in the Past Equality cohort group. And every time I feel like I get to where I can start to apply, it's the same thing. It's turnover. And so my biggest barrier is the requirements for teachers, even the 25%. I struggled to meet that. I have people that are interested. I have teachers that want to do it, but they simply, like everybody's talked about, they're all working overtime to stay in ratio. And it is just the biggest barrier. And again, I feel like it's a catch-22, right? If I could get to even level 2, which we're doing the things in the classroom that we need to be doing. It's simply the teacher education requirement that I cannot meet. And if I could get to level 2, I could pay my teachers more
Yes.
because that is a sustained income increase. But it, like I said, it's a catch-22. I just can't get there.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things, Holly, that we wonder about is when we begin to issue you the stabilization payment, whether or not that might give you enough money to do what you need to do, right, to get other educators in who meet the education qualifications to then increase your reimbursement rate, because it will be a lump sum payment. It's not going to be a biweekly payment to you. It's going to come to you in a big lump sum. So we do wonder if that'll be something that you all are able to do. But the other question I would have for you or anybody else who has their hand raised too is, some states are trying to move a little bit away from a sheer, like you have a CDA or you have a degree, to you can demonstrate certain competencies, and that those competencies can then be equivalent perhaps to someone who went on to higher education. I guess I would be curious if you think, based on your workforce challenges, whether or not you think, your new staff coming in the door who don't hold those degrees, could they demonstrate the competencies that you all certainly know they need to have to deliver high quality services? So kind of my follow-on question, but Tamika, I see your hand is up. If you would like to share, that would be great.
Yeah, so I'm Tamika Sizemore. I'm the child care manager at the YMCA in Batesville, Indiana. And I have to agree. I think, I know we all are about our teachers and trying to get the right teachers, but I think it was Aaron. We used to have so many coaches that came in and helped, but it's hard to have, going to different websites, asking solutions, to try to find the answers to things, if that makes sense.
It does. Yes. Okay.
I think it's just trying to educate our staff, because coming in, just like Holly, I think she just said, with Past Equality, we can't pay any of our new people coming in enough that has the education. So everybody that keeps applying for us is somebody that has no education, which we have to look at how many we already have that's not educated to how many that's already educated, so we don't get knocked down from a level 4 to a level 3.
Sure. Yep. I think that those are excellent points. Yes. And again, here's what I would say is I've seen comments in the chat like about non-formal CDA not being there anymore. And so here's the deal. From my chair, I'm like, no, we're still funding these things, but it doesn't matter if we are or not, because if you don't know that they're there, we're missing something. There's something we're not communicating well to you. And if to your point, you feel like you have to go 1,000 places to look for an answer, then clearly we aren't meeting your needs there either. And that's definitely really important feedback for us. So, okay, Sherry. Yeah, Sherry. Thank you, Renee.
I'm the coalition leader for Kosciuszko County, and we just rolled out a grant for local providers that they could apply for something that would help improve their quality. Half of our grants that we received were asking for some social emotional training. They all wanted some conscious discipline training. They were just it just became obvious that they're really struggling in that area. And so one of the things I did was try to go on Spark to figure out if there was anything available. I couldn't navigate the system myself. I was on hold for over 30 minutes this morning, and then just got here's an email, ask this person. So it was really frustrating for me. I can't imagine how frustrating it is for the directors who don't have the time to do that. So I guess it's just really twofold. How do we get the programs, these trainings that they are really asking for, and how do we navigate the system better so we can find out what's available?
Yes, thank you. That is super helpful feedback. Absolutely. Erin, I see your hand up as well.
Hi, it's me again from Fulton County. I was just kind of gonna tiptoe off of the one piece a little bit about past equality and the education that the teachers have to supply and all of that stuff. I think maybe an idea of some sort, and I'm not even sure how it'd work because I've not really brainstormed it, but if there was some kind of almost like a driver's education test type thing, like you were saying, except maybe somebody observing them in the classroom to see that they're meeting the competencies well. Because I think, as we all know, some are just not ready for the education piece, but they're just as qualified as those that have, they've had so many years experience in the education field or, wherever else, that they just, don't want the education or can't go get the education due to finances or whatever. I know that the Teach Scholarship exists and things like that, but me, I struggle really hard in the education. College was extremely hard for me, so I can relate to those that it is very hard for, but yet I've had 18 years experience in childcare. And so, things like that, being able to help with that education piece, we as a level 3 have to have 60 hours or something of training each year. So can some of those that we're getting professional trainings count towards their hours of education and things? Because a lot of the pieces of training that we're getting are education pieces that we learn in education. So
yeah, I think those are all excellent points. And again, when I said earlier, I think on one of the other slides about, we have to maybe think about staffing models differently. I think this is one of those areas where we maybe have to think about the staffing model differently. Because I'd love to think that the world will resume to what it was pre-COVID, but I'm not sure that's a realistic expectation. I think some things may be forever changed, and this might be one of them in terms of, what people are willing to do in terms of going back to school while working, and how do we manage all of those things. And I do think there are things for us to think about there. Any other hands I'm missing, Renee? Just make sure I'm not. Okay. All right, so last question, I think here. If you could fix, change, or reimagine anything about how our childcare system works here in Indiana, what would it be and why? I know that's a big question, but would love to hear or see your thoughts on that. Okay, so training hours into CEUs. Yep, I think that's an excellent idea. Tax breaks, yes. I have been very interested in some of the tax incentives that other states are doing. And so agree with you. I think there's a lot to be explored there that has some real potential to make this better. Yep. Yeah, Joyce, I agree with you that there has to be a way to validate experience and showing that that gives you the right competencies. And so, yeah, I would agree with you. I think there's something for us to explore. Fix everything you've already identified. Yep, I definitely hear you. We have lots of folks on the call taking good notes and capturing your chat comments. So, yeah. So I see someone talk about child to staff ratios, and what I would say is, if you're willing to unmute, I would love to hear your thoughts on that topic, because we know that that's what drives a lot of your cost. I mean, it certainly is. You know, you need to have a certain number of staff for the number of kids. However, I worry about infants in particular, right? If we had the ability to have far more infants with one adult, and whether or not that's feasible, right? Just from even a safety perspective, let alone a development perspective. But would love to hear your thoughts if that's something you're willing to share.
Hi, everyone. This is George Gutierrez. I'm a center in Lake County, Indiana. And I'm barely meeting the CCDF 25% ratio because I do have a lot of private because of the area. And, one of the challenges obviously is the pre-K that we talked about. The issue is that, that's the higher profit rooms that we have. And unfortunately, other things that have happened with schools opening pre-K. So there's a lot of things that I think that's pinching us across the board. But I think the child staff ratios really drives kind of what we can and can't do. And I know it's obviously is different for ministries versus home centers and versus licensed centers. So that might be an opportunity there that we can look at. But I think, there's a lot of great conversations that have happened, I think, and I'm really looking forward to see what comes out of these conversations, to see how you guys can help us, because obviously it's a very much needed, necessity for provide quality care. And we love what we do. And ultimately, we need help. A lot of public schools get a lot of public funding, right, to manage their most of the compensation for staff and, able to provide benefits. But, being a small business and really trying to drive profit to help, stay afloat, it is challenging. And I think this is just an area I think that can truly make a big difference on the ratios.
Awesome. Thank you. That's super helpful. So let's see. I was trying to go back to the comment, I think from Jessica. Can you say, if you're willing to, will you say more about your comment about the ratios being difficult with the 13-month rule? Could you just say more about that if you're willing to?
Yeah, absolutely. So I learned this when we became a licensed center, because I was a director of a ministry before. So there's the 13-month rule where the children that are 2 and under can only be within 13 months apart. So if you have an infant, they can't be with, say, an almost 2-year-old, basically, even though they're 2 and under. So often, like the end of the day, especially during COVID or different times or early in the morning, we'll end up paying one person per child because of the rule, the 13-month rule, when we have like 2 kids there. Or it's a staff kid and we're like, well, we can't cut you because we have to keep you for this class.
Yes.
And so that has been a struggle, I would say. And
okay,
to be honest, it's really hard to have to follow some rules that a lot of people don't have to follow. And I've been in-home ministry and center. And so it's very frustrating in that sense too, that it's like, okay, but if this is a safety issue, why isn't it a safety issue for all?
Sure.
Yeah,
I totally agree. I don't know the history of how schools got to be where they are and we are where we are, but this is definitely the right time to be thinking about those things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you. That's super helpful. Oh yeah, Erin, I see your hand up.
Sorry. I
Oh,
did
that's
have
great.
a question regarding that again, because I also don't know where that came from, that rule and stuff. But I also am trying to understand, because I am a ministry, director of a ministry, but we are a VCP ministry. So we have to follow even different guidelines than, I mean, we're the in-betweenies, I guess.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to figure out like what the difference is from a 2-year-old to a 2.5-year-old, where it jumps from 5 to 7. You know, a lot of the time there's not much difference there that I'm seeing. There's quite the difference between 1 and 2, but not so much between 2 and 2.5. So just wondering where we got that ratio and why and stuff like that. So
I think those are great questions. And again, I'm sorry, I don't know that I have the history of that, but certainly I think it's something for us to look into. And I think it's a good note. It's a good thing to know that's a pain point for some of you, because that gives us a place to start. Debbie, I don't know if you're willing to unmute, but I would like to hear more about if there's something that we talked about today that you feel like isn't applicable to homes. I certainly want to know that, because that is not the intent in any way, shape, or form. And it's okay if you don't want to. That's all right. Okay. So we just have a couple minutes left here, because I want to be super sensitive to your time. So any kind of final things that you're like, yes, we would like you to think more about this. And this will not be the last time we come to talk to you. We really want to be sure that as we're starting down this path of planning, that we are able to incorporate your feedback and then come back to you and say, okay, so here's what we're thinking about our plan. Tell us where we're missing, or those pieces. So please, not at all the last time to provide input. So I see things about needing to understand the funding better. Okay. And the 21-year-old requirement for infants and toddlers. Okay, I definitely see that too. Oh yes, side-by-side regulations. Yes, we have started to take that on in the last couple of years, because we have to promulgate new rules based off of federal rules changing. And so hopefully what you'll see is when those rules come out, better alignment as much as we can. But yes, we agree there are just some challenges with some of those things being so different, and how do we navigate all of that? That is not easy. Tamika, your questions about the BLG scholarship, yeah, feel free to unmute, ask what you would like.
Okay, I do have a quick question. And honestly, it could have already been sent out. I've received so many different things from everywhere. I'm trying to keep track of everything. So we do have some families that are on the Build, Learn, Grow scholarship. And I did send off like the renewal form for them. And I didn't know is that a direct yes, they're going to receive it, or do we still have to wait to get it accepted?
So once you submit the invoice for payment, either ELI or IAN will contact you if there's a problem, but otherwise then both of them are paying typically within 2 to 3 weeks, and they've had some hiccups here and there, I guess I would say. But if you want to email me after this, you can either email me directly or the provider inquiry mailbox and tell me kind of like, hey, here are the kids I'm waiting on. We're happy to run that down for you.
Okay, yeah, because some of my families are worried because it ended July 31st, but we started our new thing on August. So we're making families pay full price. And then we're like, well, when we receive it, we can give you what you overpaid. And that's where some of our families are struggling, because the reason why they needed the scholarship is because they couldn't pay full price.
Yeah, so hopefully you saw that we extended the Build, Learn, Grow scholarship through the end of March.
Yes.
So yeah, so then you should be able to submit new claims for those same families to get paid, so that you're not needing to charge them full price again.
Okay, because I didn't know if I still had to wait for them for the money to come in before we say, okay, they paid the 80, you paid the 20, or vice versa.
That's really up to you as a business.
Okay.
That's really up to you. We know some providers have said, yes, we'll go ahead and not charge you the whole thing. Others have said, we're going to charge you and then refund your money. We'd leave that up to you to see, what makes the most sense for you. So I see Renee put my email. In there just so that you have that. And again, questions that you have, feel free to email me directly or the provider inquiry mailbox. Renee and I both keep an eye on that so that way you can get to us anytime you need. But please feel free to do that. So anyways, I really, really appreciate everyone's time today. This will not be the last time we come to ask for your thoughts and input, but really do know how busy you are and really appreciate just your taking an hour to be with us today. So we will talk soon. Thank you so much. And we'll look forward to getting back together here in the next little bit. Thank you.